all about the crochet. I'll put you in the know. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Jayda InStitches show.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Jayda InStitches show. One of the most commonly asked questions I get is, what yarn should I use for what project? Generally, when this question is asked, they're referring to the fiber or material that makes up the yarn in question. The kind of yarn you use in a project has a huge impact on the wearability or the usability or the washability of the product that you're making. And it's really, really important that you pick the right yarn for the project that you're making. So what do I mean by that? Well, consider this. You know how long it takes to make something. Consider all the hard work, the attention to detail, the heart and soul that you've poured into a project, like a baby blanket, or maybe a full-sized Afghan, maybe an item of clothing, even a toy. Now picture it coming out of the washing machine, all mangled or shrunken or felted. Imagine somebody putting a hot pot down on it and it melting. Or worse, imagine wrapping up a newborn baby in a beautiful baby blanket only to have her break out in hives. These are situations you want to avoid. So it's really important that you know what kind of fiber is in your yarn when you go to make a project. Yarn is made from spinning long fibers together. And in fact, this is where we get to the concept of the ply, or the ply count of a yarn. So several ply, 1 ply, 2 ply, 3 ply, 4 ply, blah, say that 10 times fast, is probably what you're used to hearing about when you consider a ball of yarn. You often hear me say, I'm using 4 ply worsted weight yarn. That's a very common ply, and the ply is reference to the long fibers that are spun together to make up that ball of yarn. There are 3 main categories that make up the different kinds of fibers that can be found in yarn. There are natural fibers, there are synthetic fibers, and then there are blends of fibers. Natural fibers can fall into 2 different categories. There's animal-based fibers, and then there are plant-based fibers. Synthetic fibers are man-made materials, and blends are any combination of the above. So they can be natural and natural, synthetic and synthetic, or quite commonly natural and synthetic. There are so many different kinds of fibers that can be found in yarn that I went ahead and made us all a cheat sheet. So if you head to my website, go to the tools page, we've got something called Types of Yarn Materials. It'll be a thumbnail that looks something like that. Underneath it will be the PDF link. Just click on that and you can download a copy of it. I've outlined almost all of the commonly and some of the uncommonly found fibers that you will find if you're yarn shopping, a bit about where they're from, and a little bit about what they're good for. And in today's tutorial, I'm going to talk about the most commonly found yarns, especially the ones that I use most here on the show. First, I'm going to talk about some of the natural fibers. Wool is a natural fiber. And for those of you who don't know, wool comes from sheep. It comes from sheep fleece, specifically. In the spring, sheep are sheared, meaning that they take a big razor and they shave off all of their fur, kind of like if you were to go to the barber and get all your hair shaved off. Then they can sort of prance around all through the summer, all nice and cool, and then it grows back in over the course of the year so that they're nice and warm and woolly in the winter, and then in the spring, they have it all shaved off again. This is then washed and carded, so it's pulled across these big bristly brushes so that it's thinned out, and then it's spun using a spinner or even a hand spinner. You can do this sort of thing yourself, but generally speaking, it's spun in huge machines in just big sort of warehouses, and then it's turned into balls of yarn that look something like this. Wool is a dense, often scratchy fiber that has been used for making clothes and blankets probably for millennia. Wool is really warm. It keeps out the cold and the dampness, and it's one of the more affordable natural fibers. Wool can be used to make just about any project, but be warned, wool fibers are pretty grabby. They've got like little claws on them, and if they're machine washed, it'll felt and shrink. It's generally recommended that you hand wash anything you make out of wool and then lay it flat to dry. Wool, as I mentioned, has some kind of unique properties. Because its fibers have almost like little claws in it, and it's grabby, you can even sort of feel it when you pick up a ball of yarn. You can kind of feel the resistance when you run your fingers across it. This is why it will felt if you machine wash it. And what do I mean by felting? Well, those fibers, so picture these little fibers here in my hands, all start to mesh together when it's getting tumbled around in the washing machine, and after a while, they lock into place. And if you've ever seen a piece of felt, that's exactly why it's called felting, because originally felt was made from jamming all of these wool pieces back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, all those wool fibers together to get this one solid piece of felt. And it's smooth. You don't see the individual stitches anymore. So felting can actually be a really neat design choice. And some people will knit or crochet an object and purposely felt it to get that flat look. But if you don't want something to felt, oh my goodness, don't put it in the washing machine. Just gently hand wash it and lay it flat to dry. And then it won't shrink and it won't felt on you. And one last comment on wool before we move on. Wool, because of its grabby little fibers, is probably not the best choice for baby blankets or baby clothing. A lot of people have trouble with wool. They find it itchy or irritating. So if you're going to make something for someone's brand new baby, remember that that skin is very new and very gentle, and you want to make sure you use something very gentle against that skin. So leave the wool on the shelf for the baby projects. Another natural fiber that's commonly found in yarn is cotton. I have a big ball of it here. This cotton is a 4-ply worsted weight yarn, and you see me use this all the time, especially when I'm making something for the home, like a dishcloth or maybe a pillow sham. Cotton is a lovely, breathable fiber, but it doesn't always come in 4-ply. It can come in other sizes too. Cotton washes really well, and it's really durable. It also won't melt when exposed to high heat, which is another reason that it's great to use in the kitchen. Makes for great dishcloths and hot pads. It's also very soft, and it's fun to work with. This is a 4-ply cotton. This is typically what I use when I'm making projects for around the house. But this is a 1-ply cotton. This is a mercanized or mercerized cotton thread that's used for lace making, like tablecloths or maybe fine collars for around your neck. Look how absolutely thin that is. It's beautiful. It also doesn't have a softness or sort of a fluffiness to it like this lightly twisted 4-ply worsted weight cotton yarn does. So these are both 100% cotton, but they look completely different. Because cotton is a natural fiber and it's soft and it's got breathability, this makes it really good for baby projects. So if you're going to make a baby blanket or some baby clothing and you don't necessarily want to use a man-made synthetic, then I recommend cotton. They make baby yarns in cotton, which are nice and soft, and you can also get organic cotton yarn. Organic cotton yarn means that it's been grown and processed without the use of any kind of herbicides or other nasty bleaching chemicals that you might find in more common yarn. But cotton is washable, it's really durable, and the dishcloths you make out of it, you will have for years. So those were the two more common natural fibers that you'll find in yarn. Now let's talk about some common synthetic fibers that you'll find in yarn. What's the most common synthetic fiber you'll find in yarn? Acrylic. I love acrylic. I use it in just about every project I do here on the channel that's not for the kitchen. Acrylic also washes well, and it really holds its color. So when you create an acrylic yarn, because it's a man-made fiber and not a natural fiber, acrylic tends to hold its color, and it's even in its color. And what do I mean by that? Well, sometimes if you go to a yarn store and you see sort of the natural yarns, the wools or maybe even some of the cottons, the dyeing looks a little tie-dyed. It kind of meanders its way through the skein of yarn, and it's beautiful, but that isn't necessarily always the look you're going for. You might want to go for just a solid, even color, and that's where the synthetics come in really nicely. They can get their color nice and sort of even throughout the entire ball of yarn as they're sort of dyeing it and creating it, and it also keeps its color too. So generally speaking, acrylic yarn won't run if you put it in the washing machine. Oh yeah, and you can put acrylic in the washing machine. This washes really well. It generally won't shrink, especially if you use cool water, and you can tumble it in the washing machine. You can also just hang it to dry on the line. So there are some real advantages to using acrylic. Acrylic is made from man-made polymers like vinyl acetate. Acrylic yarn is affordable, washable, dyed in every color of the rainbow, and is an excellent choice for blankets, toys, and clothes. It's also a good choice for people who have allergies to natural fibers like wool and can come in many different finishes and levels of softness. However, acrylic is much like plastic and as such is not a good choice for making pot holders or anything else that might come into contact with high heat. As handy as acrylic is, it's pretty much a plastic. So with that in mind, it's probably not your best choice for making things like pot holders or anything else that might come into contact with high heat. Acrylic actually has a fairly low melt point when it comes to these sorts of things. I think it's around 160 degrees Celsius, if I'm going to get all geeky and nerdy about it. And so it's not going to melt necessarily like blah, but it might, the little tiny fibers might stick to, say, your hot cup of coffee if you put your mug down on an acrylic coaster. Or if you go to grab something out of the oven, you might end up sort of burning a little hole through it. So I recommend cotton or wool for use in those sort of situations in the kitchen and not necessarily acrylic. You can save the acrylic for all the fun things like, you know, toys and blankets and stuff. Another commonly found synthetic is polyester. Polyester is also a man-made material, but it typically comes from naturally occurring polymers, like those found in petroleum or even plant cuticles. Polyester is largely stretch and shrink resistant and provides excellent protection against the wind and the rain. It's really good for outdoor projects, outdoor wear, and even slippers because it's a little more durable and hard-wearing than acrylic is. Some of the more goofy and fun yarns that are on the market are often polyester, specifically because it has that sort of strength and durability a little bit more than its cousin acrylic. However, it does have a low melt point like its cousin acrylic, and so it's probably not a good choice for projects that might be exposed to heat because polyester's even been known to ignite when held next to a significant heat source. So these are great for scarves and other little fun projects you might be doing. Just don't wear them in the kitchen when you're cooking. Blended yarns look like every other kind of yarn on the market. They may even feel very much like a wool or an acrylic, but when you go and read the label, you'll find out that maybe they're 50% cotton and 50% acrylic, or 80% wool and 20% acrylic, or even more combinations like 80% wool and 10% acrylic and 10% nylon or something like that. The reason that they blend fibers together to make yarn is, well, multifold. Not only does it make it a lot more affordable in some cases, you also get that nice consistent dyeing because of the man-made fibers that are in it. You also have a lot more wearability and durability because you've strengthened the fibers of, say, wool with acrylic. And it also washes a little bit better than, say, it's 100% natural sort of source. So like if it's just 100% wool, it's going to felt, it's going to shrink. But if you mix it with acrylic, it might wash a little bit better in the washing machine. That said, regardless of what yarn you are using, it's really recommended that you follow all of the wash and care instructions on the label of your yarn. And if you don't have a label on your yarn, either because you got this yarn from a friend and the labels are gone, or you kind of accidentally just tossed them already, then it's always better to err on the side of, I don't know what it is, and treat it like a delicate. So if you don't know what it is, I recommend hand washing in cool water and laying flat to dry. Even if it winds up being acrylic, it'll have a lot more wearability and durability down the road if you treat it like a fine, fine piece of linen. And that is it for this week, everybody. Remember to like our videos, subscribe if you haven't already, and please share our videos with all of your crafty friends on the socials. Oh, and if they're the reading type, direct them to our website and they can get a copy of this cheat sheet too. That said, stay safe, be crafty, and have an awesome week, everybody. We'll see you next Friday for another video. Bye!